Game week never sounded better. Miami taking on UAB at Hard Rock on a Thursday night. This is Tuesday afternoon. Do the addition, the subtraction. 2 days to football on the field for the Canes and Power 5 football in the ACC. We got the Holsum one on the line to take your comments, your questions, your debate topics for us as we preview the game against the Blazers. Holsum one, how you doing today?
I'm amped, baby. It's game week. It's time to get after it, man. It's a whole lot of talk that's been going on for months. Canes have been off-season national champs for years. Now it's time to see if we can do it again this year and get it handled and get it done. And it's a quality team we're going to start out with because UAB is far from a scrub that we can just line up and blow them out and, the fans get all hyped. So it's going to be a nice challenge going into 10 straight ACC games on our way to ACC championship appearance.
As you mentioned, Holsum one, we've been talking Miami, of course, just about every day for the last 7 or 8, 9 months, going back to the Louisiana Tech game. So we have covered the personnel, the units, the breakdowns all over the place, and a few things have changed or maybe been a little modified or adjusted based on what we've seen in the 3 scrimmages and in practice. But basically, we have covered the personnel to death. We will obviously answer people's questions, but let's start out by focusing on the opponent. UAB, as you mentioned, a Conference USA championship 2 years ago, made it back to the conference championship game last year. They have represented themselves fairly well. I don't want to overstate it against the Power 5. The other day I looked at since they dropped football and had that actually taken away from them more accurately by the Alabama State Legislature in 2015 and 16, came back in 2017 and have played the likes of Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Florida, and have competed typically in the first half, but lost by 3 to 4 touchdowns in those games. Now they've got Miami at Hard Rock. They've got a game under their belts. If you just look at the score, 45-35 over Central Arkansas, a game in which they certainly concentrated on the ground game and pounding it straight forward, only had to put the ball up about 20 times with Tyler Johnson throwing for 143 yards. So what did you gather from the UAB effort the other day?
Well, first off, it was a tale of like 2 separate halves and kind of just like the ending of the first half because Central Arkansas made a late push, but I mean, you kind of were able to see who was the better team for a while there. But when you watch UAB, one of the biggest things that jump off to you is the dynamic ability of their offense. It's very multiple. You're going to get some under the center. You're going to get some shotgun. You're going to get some pistol, but you're also going to get run game out of all 3 facets. When people think spread, they always think finesse, and they think just airing the ball out. But obviously, Mark just illustrated to you that their quarterback was 17 of 25. Their starter was 17 of 25 for 143. And their backup, who's a little bit more dynamic, was 7 of 9 for 83 yards. So it wasn't something crazy through the air. It's the nice run game that they're bringing to the table. And when you watch this is the 3rd time I've watched the game, and their O-line they don't pull. They're more of kind of zone blocking on the offensive line. The running back figures the hole out, and when he does find it, he hits it. They got a nice staple of running backs. Number 1 and number 4 are both Brown. Spencer Brown, Jermaine Brown, very good running backs bringing to the table. One in particular, number 1, the true sophomore, 5'8", 175 pounds. Jermaine Brown is the dynamic speed back out of the 2. But the balance back is number 4, Spencer Brown, who's a true senior, 6 foot, 220 pounds. So he brings a little bit more of the balance, but he can pull away from you if need be too. Now, he carried the load last week with a lot of carries. I think he had 17 carries. That's a lot of carries for a back. Okay, so we're able to get a lot of film on him, man. And the thing for me, when you look at this, is the biggest key to this game. I talked about their offense. Their defense is a little different, running a 2-4-5. A lot of teams don't run that, Mark, a 2-4-5, meaning they have athletic interior, really tall and long off of the edge. 6'6" and 6'7" are their stand-up outside linebackers. Both 250 pounds plus guys bringing to the table a nice edge presence. Number 16, Alex Wright, is 6'7", 260. He's their strong side outside linebacker edge player. He's more of the power rusher, how he's coming off the edge, how he likes to set the edge against the run game, going against your right tackle. Their weak side edge rusher is number 22, Jordan Smith, a redshirt junior who's 6'7", 255 pounds. He's more of your finesse player. Likes to, even in the run game, Mark, he's more of the swatting the hands down as opposed to engaging offensive tackles and setting an edge. He likes to disengage immediately because he's not as stout against the run as Alex Wright is. So some people may look at it like I'm going too in-depth for a UAB team, but when you're the Miami Hurricanes who have lost to La Tech, who have lost to FIU, who, you know, and going into the coaching fraternity that I am going into, man, you got to be detailed, okay? You got to be detailed. Every team deserves respect. Until proven otherwise, as far as on the football field, win or loss, these as young men, these as coaches who, and their head coach is a quality head coach also. And they got a pretty solid staff. You know, when Miami played solid staffs last year, it didn't go well for us at all. So when you talk about going over detailed and going into what we're bringing up against the table, man, know thy opponent. Know who's lining up against you. Know what they like to do and how they do it. And what they do well and what you can use against them. And when you talk about UAB as a whole, they had an advantage over us, especially with the tackling issue. This is across all college football, Mark. For years, you watch college football, I don't believe until week 3 or 4 you start to see the tackling get to where it's no problem. I still think you know, week 1, week 2, week 3, it's still little issues. You know, your DBs are still kind of missing tackles by week 3. By week 4, everybody's rolling as far as being able to tackle, taking on hits, holding on to the football. This year is going to be even different because we didn't have spring. So, you know, just having the fumble pickups for defensive players or holding on to the ball for our offensive players and trying not to get the ball yanked out. You know, they haven't had that motion in a while. So, I'm excited about what we can bring to the table. I know for a fact that UAB is going to be a motivated team. They're going to be a team that likes to attack the edges early in downs. When you talk about third down, they like to go across the middle on offense. And third down on defense, they move in number 16, Alex Wright, to defensive tackle. And they do an over front. And they bring one of their edge linebackers, another edge linebacker on. So they like to play with a lot of speed. They can be a little bit multiple as a team with a little bit of power. But both offensively and defensively, you're looking at a team that likes to play speed, likes to use the edges, but they can play some power, strong ball too. So Miami, we got to show up, man, and we got to tackle well. Biggest thing for me as far as the Miami Hurricanes defense versus these UAB offense is going to be defensive tackle and cornerback play. The key to stopping this offense that loves to go to the edges, loves all this eye candy with the motions, with their tight ends, with their running backs, with their slot wide receivers to really get your linebackers confused. If your defensive tackles get penetration early, it can really stop a lot of what's going on with the eye candy stuff. Because if you can't get the ball off, you're trying to do an ace jet and your guard just got blown up and now the wide receiver's running right into the guard, you won't be able to do that too often. But it's doing it on a consistent basis. I don't expect Nestor or Ford or Miller to have their guards blowing up every single time, but getting a nice knockback and playing on the other side of the line of scrimmage, especially what you look for when you have a group of 5 team playing an FCS Power 5 team. You want to be able to see a big difference in the fronts. And as far as their wide receiving core, I can spend 30 minutes talking about these 3 redshirt seniors, JUCO transfers, big, fast, can catch the ball. They high point the ball at its highest point. Cornerback has been a little issue at Miami for a while. So we're going to see how that combats each other. Where I feel comfortable with Miami, defensive ends against their offensive tackles. And I also like our wide receivers against their cornerbacks. So to bring it home, I think Miami's going to do well. I think we're going to have a good game. I think UAB is going to come in and fight early. It's going to take Miami to pull away because if they hang out in this game, Mark, I'm going to be very angry the next time we see each other because UAB is going to be very motivated and ready to upset a team because they don't fear Miami. Why? Because of La Tech. Why? Because of Central Michigan. Why? Because of FIU. And until we start to prove those type of things, I don't think any team's going to fear the U recently.
Talking Miami football, we've got the Holsum one here to take your comments, your questions, your debate topics. I will be checking out the live chat. He's previewing UAB. Of course, the game is coming up in 2 days. We are just about 50 hours away from football at Hard Rock with UAB in town again. 2 consecutive appearances in Conference USA's championship game. And to extend on your point, and this may be even more important this season than in any other offseason leading into week 1. They're experienced, especially in offense, with 10 returning starters. They're only missing 1 starting wide receiver from last year. You mentioned in particular Austin Watkins, a player that totaled over 1,000 yards at wide receiver last year on 57 catches. But all the offensive productivity, for the most part, is back. The 2 Browns in the backfield carry the ball, carry the lumber, and put up 233 yards on the ground against Central Arkansas. One thing of note that you also mentioned in liking Miami's ability to get pressure on the quarterback against their tackles is that UAB had the highest rate of interceptions in the country last year. So to get that straight, they didn't throw the most interceptions, but if you put the interceptions against the pass attempts, they had the highest rate of interceptions. And based on the preview information I've looked at, that was only a partial quarterback issue with Tyler Johnston. He's an experienced kid. Wasn't necessarily him. A lot of pressure on him, a lot of forced throws, a lot of tipped passes, something that Miami, with their speed, athleticism, length at defensive end, and ability to put pressure on the quarterback, could take advantage of.
Absolutely, Mark. And to add to what all you have brought to the table, I think our head coach, Coach Manny Diaz, our offensive coordinator, Coach Rick Lashley, our defensive coordinator, Coach Blake Baker, have all talked about the experience. And it's funny because we had talked about that last time we were on, as far as returning snaps or returning starters, it's kind of can be misleading. But if you have been in a system for as long as a lot of these guys have been in, a couple are JUCO transfers, yes, but at least a full year or 2 in these same offensive and defensive systems, you usually see an ability where they can play super fast. And that's the biggest difference between players thinking and players knowing. Oh, I know when I see that hand signal, this is exactly what I have to do. I even know what the man next to me has to do. I know what the O-linemen are doing. I know what the QB is thinking because we're reading the same coverage, as a wide receiver, if you're thinking that way. That makes the game a lot easier. And from what I've noticed, they played 2 quarterbacks in that game. Okay, and you have seen some Miami ball over the last couple of years. It doesn't work out well when you're playing 2 quarterbacks. Okay, now, Johnston, the starter, he's a lot more of the can get the job done, won't make a mistake type of person, even though he did against Central Arkansas. The person that gets me a little thrown off is Bryson, number 12, the redshirt freshman. Now, he's a little short at 6'1" as opposed to 6'2", but he is the dynamic player of the 2. The offense runs a little faster because he's a little bit more mobile. He's willing to pull those read options. He's willing to not just hand it off to the running back and let him go off, even though the Browns were doing well. He was the one willing to pull it out, step and throw that now route to the slot wide receiver. He was willing to pull it out and throw the seam route to the tight end. So as far as the contrast and how both of them are going to play, that's going to be a factor because I think we're going to see both of these young men. And a lot of teams like to put that on film so that you have to spend time scouting both. And instead of just focusing in and spending, 30 more minutes on the run game, 30 more minutes on the pass game, we're going to have to scout how the offense is ran separately with the 2 separate quarterbacks, how the offensive coordinator feels comfortable with either one. Because it's not like you're just changing wide receivers. No, they're changing the signal caller, and the team plays different depending on who's on the football field. One of them has a better arm than the other. Johnston has more of the accurate arm, and he can go and put the ball in position. But number 12, Bryson, he likes to just kind of take the chances. He's not as accurate, but he can lob it up and throw it up there and give it a chance deep down the field. And it's not the most accurate when it comes out of his hands. It's very wobbly past 20 yards. But, we've seen wobbly balls be caught and, be pretty well. But number 12 brings a different dynamic to the offense as opposed to Johnson, the starter, number 17. So, and if there's still a competition between a redshirt junior and a redshirt freshman in the second game of the season, that can be a little alarming too for what UAB has to bring to the table. So, not to talk them up like they're just going to win a natty, but either way, we're going to respect every team. You don't have to fear anybody, but at least respect them enough to do your diligent research and know what they're bringing to the table so that the team can be successful.
We so much appreciate the super chats coming in. Thank you so much, Ronan Jones. It's been a long 9 months. Can't wait for Thursday night. Holsum, although both will play. Were you surprised to see Jennings ahead of Brooks on the depth chart? Keep up the great work, guys. Go Canes.
Thank you very much, Ronan Jones. He's a avid supporter of all us Miami Hurricanes YouTubers. So we appreciate you for being hashtag Live Squad. Shout out to the Live Squad that's in the house. BJ Jennings is somebody that I've talked about a lot on here, Mark. Cam Underwood has given him a lot of credit as far as what he's going to bring to the table, and it was a blessing to see him win this job. BJ Jennings and Wayman Steed are the two linebackers that we took back in 2017. They were after the Bermuda Triangle of Shaq Quarterman and Michael Pinckney and Zach McLeod. So they have been around for a while. But the last 2 seasons, injuries have stopped them from contributing to this team at all. Whether it's ACLs, whether it's hips, whether it's ankles, whether it's shoulders, it's just been so injury riddled. And now to see BJ Jennings go through as much as he had and has now be the starting middle linebacker, because it was already talked about that Zach McLeod was the middle. Whoever played next to him was a debate. It's to the point where BJ Jennings came in and took the starting job at middle, to where Zach, in order to start, had to go to the weak side linebacker position. That's an amazing feat for what BJ Jennings is bringing to the table. He's a little bit more of the traditional middle linebacker, Mark. He's a stout 6'1", 240 pounds. He's coming downhill and he's blasting. But he's way more athletic than Shaq Quarterman. So we're not going to have the whole, 4'7", 40 guy rarely being able to make it to the ball and could only get there off of instinct. No, BJ Jennings has the speed to be able to go make those plays. To answer the question, I was not surprised, but I was thoroughly impressed and happy to see that, because you get a true sophomore in Sam Brooks, who now doesn't have to take on that workload as far as you have to be the guy right now. You can come in, contribute. He was a pass rusher coming out of Miami Northwestern, or a defensive end, led Dade County in sacks. And we've talked about it on here a lot. As far as the Miami Hurricane staff, always going to get defense ends and trying to force them to be linebackers. Sometimes you can be a 6'1", 6'2" edge rusher. That's okay. There's guys that can do that at a high level. And at the University of Miami, we need to start giving them chances to do so. So I think Sam Brooks is going to be well running down on special teams and rotating in. But it's great to see BJ Jennings as our starting Mike.
Another super chat coming in. We will get that to the screen in just a second and answer that question. And again, Ronan, thank you so much for the contribution and the continued support. As Holsum One says, you're all over it here and at his channel, supporting Miami football content. Got a number of questions coming in. We will probably need to focus more on the relevant ones. I'm going to get to one that's extremely specific, so the Holsum One can go as far as he wants with this one. But we're talking about a player here in Patrick Joyner, who played 3 games as a freshman, made 5 tackles, sat out as a sophomore as a redshirt, coming back, switched to defensive end. Any thoughts about that?
Listen, Mark, in certain schemes in high school, you know, when you're recruiting guys, you want to look at what they do well and how it translates to what they can do for your program. Okay. So at 6'2", 200, and I think it was like 18 pounds coming out of high school, he was like a bigger guy. But at all the camps, he would play DN. And so the conversation in our fan base was, okay, we've been recruiting these guys who, because at the time he came in, we had Joe Jackson, who's 6'5". You got John Garvin, who's 6'4". Greg Rousseau, who's 6'6". So we were really recruiting the taller defensive ends. So the conversation was, what are we going to do with Pat Joyner? Because he's smaller compared to everyone else. He's a little bit more stout against the run and thicker. But you turn on his film, and he played in a 3.35 marker, 3.35 over. which means that he was to stand up outside linebacker where you had 3 other down linemen, and he would blitz off the edge. All of it was linebacker, but he's an edge rusher. But Miami's running that 4-2-5. So what are we going to do? So the scholarship numbers worked out to where he would have to play linebacker. So he comes in as a linebacker, but then spring of his freshman year, so spring after the fall, he goes back to the end. Then he gets moved back to linebacker. And now we're moving him back to defensive end. What I would like for him to be is a strong side defensive end. That's what he brings to the table. That's what he does well. Why pull him out of water and turn him into a middle linebacker just because he's 6'2"? He's stout against the run. He has very good hands, and all of his high school film proves that. Now the numbers at linebacker was also the reason why he had to keep moving back, because of whom we just talked about. B.J. Jennings and Wayman Steed continued to get hurt. So there was a conversation of who can we pull back here to get some depth at this position, because it got to a point where Ryan Rigoni, a walk-on linebacker, had to start versus Georgia Tech because we had guys who got hurt. One of those guys, including, was Pat Joyner, who broke his fibula. So it was a lot of injuries as to why this was happening, and people were being moved to linebacker and switching positions back and forth. So I'm excited and happy that he gets to go to defensive end. He's going to be behind. He's already running third team, in front of a defensive end who's been here for a while, who's doing pretty well in Quentin Williams. Okay, he came in and beat him out and made the third team on the depth chart. And the only guys he's behind is Javari Harvey, who we've talked about a lot on this channel, and Jalen Phillips, who anybody is going to think this dude's going to go crazy for the Miami Hurricanes off the edge. So I want him to be able to hone in, put on the weight, because he's had to go back and forth. At one point, Mark, he was 240 because he's playing the end. They made him come back down to 225 because they were moving him back to linebacker, So now he gets to go in, put on the weight, focus and hone in as being a strong side defensive end, and hopefully he can contribute to the Miami Hurricanes off the edge for the youth.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We bring you Miami football talk live with the Holsum One on a regular basis. Please lock it in here with the subscription. Hashtag live squad, hashtag rewatch squad, hashtag notification squad. That's the trifecta right there.
3-part monster, baby.
And again, most of the time, even if you join us live, consider most of the time, most of you are able to jump in a little bit late. So you got to go back, watch the video, and see what you missed as we hit most of the biggest news off the top. All right. Kyle Smith, appreciate this, sir. Started watching during the COVID mess. So you haven't even watched this during football season. So just lock it in, Kyle. We appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Finally got around to a live show to comment and donate. Go Canes. Let's take care of business. Appreciate that, Kyle. Love it.
Appreciate you, Kyle.
So we've got David McKee on the live chat asking about whether you think that it being week 1, obviously D'Eriq King getting used to a new offense. I don't know how much it resembles what he did at Houston, considering what Red Lashley likes to do. I would think that there are a lot of similarities. But David asking about whether you think the whole playbook's going to be available to the offense.
I think, and Coach Red Lashley actually talked about this yesterday, as far as the freedom he's given D'Eriq King. D'Eriq King was able to take this, and him and Red Lashley kind of put what he did well at Houston mixed with what Red Lashley likes to do with all he's been at UConn, Auburn, SMU. So I think it's gonna similarly look to what was ran at Auburn back in 2013, but modern, as far as what the offense is gonna look like. Because he had Shane Buechele, who wasn't, athletic much, isn't mobile much, and he looked pretty well in the SMU offense. Now you're gonna have someone who is a dynamic runner and actually a very good passer also. So I think as far as the availability of the playbook is going to be up to hashtag Manny Target Squad. Come on, Mark. You're messing me up, man. I'm in the middle of a soliloquy. Drop that one on me.
I'm just the messenger.
Anyway, The offense is going to be based off of not only De'Aaron King, but, how he can convey that message to the rest of the team. I think a lot of people don't understand, coaches, they know the offense. Like the issue is how good of a teacher you are to be able to give that knowledge and that information to players for them to go out and execute. So I believe over the next 48 hours, so in between now and game day, there's going to be a lot of eval, a lot of tests, a lot of sitting down and on pen paper, a lot of when I give this hand signal, what do you know? What is, because they need to know, they being the coaches and the quarterback, what everybody else knows. Not what you could get right. What do you know? Because in the spur of the moment, when what happens counts, when they're taking stats, when they're taking score, you have to know that you know this is going to go down when we snap the football. Okay, so if I were to put a percentage on it, I think maybe about 60 or 70%. If I see them just rolling and going super fast and not really having to take timeouts and stuff like that, I think maybe they'll be running at 80 or 90%. But there is truth to coaches holding some things back, especially going into a 10-game stretch against ACC opponents, going into Louisville, who may not be the most talented team, but best believe their offense is going to come to play because they're pretty pissed about what we did to them last year. So there's going to be some things that they may not want to put on film. There's going to be some wrinkles, even from UAB last week to this week versus us. And that's why I say I was happy that Central Arkansas made a push, because it made UAB open it up a little bit more, show a little more to pull away. And even then, they still really didn't. It was all within 10 points. So I think the offense right now is going to be about 70% open playbook. And we'll see what happens on Thursday.
Go to your search bar here on YouTube and type in Holsum 1, just as you see it right there, HOLSUM and the number 1. If you do that, you're going to see right near the top of the screen the Holsum 1's channel, and you can lock it in right there. Subscribe to his channel. When I caught him last night, and I'll direct this toward the Holsum 1 here, when I broke in on your live stream last night, the Holsum 1 was getting after the crew. You had obviously laid down some lessons the last few weeks on some schemes, and you weren't getting the answers. You weren't getting the responses, and the coach was coming out.
Yeah, man, it was bad because it's like, and I understand everybody. Some people just want to watch football, but for me, when I'm watching a game, my eyes go to the O-line, D-line, and it's just where I am. And I have explained to my fan base and my subscribers the techniques of defensive line for years now. Simple, 1 technique, 3 technique, 2 5 techniques. I think that's just basic football. So, I'm going on about this guy's lined up there, and then I'm like, oh, pop quiz, 3 technique. Where is it on the defensive line, and where are they located as far as on the placement of the offensive lineman? And they were messing it up, man. And I had to bring out my handy dandy whiteboard, and I had to explain to them yet again. Had to make sure we got that pop quiz right, baby. But yeah, that was hilarious that you popped in at that point. Yeah, because I was not a happy camper.
From the time I started playing football, I remember before I learned what technique meant on the football field, it spoke to me like when you think of somebody's technique, it's more of a style thing. Correct. But on the football field, it's a position versus your opponent on the field. Correct. And being a running back and learning, okay, the way we handle our offensive playbook and our terminology is we split the left side of the field, the right side of the field. So you've got the center and you got the 0 and the 1, then you got the 2 gap, the 4 get on down the line, then you got the 1 and the 3, and you're maybe the 4 back is the tailback, and you're going to run a 40. So bam, you're going to ride that center and you're going to go straight up the gut, and so forth and so on. And that was my first education on positioning on the football field in 7th grade.
Oh, wow. Because they're referring to a back as a 40. That's pretty That's way back there because now it only goes, half, which is half back. So if it's a 21 dive, they're going on the left side up the one gap because to the left is odd and to the right is even. If it's 22, half back dive up the two hole, just like that. It's just simple, but that's also years of me hearing it, years of knowing what that is, so it's a little different. But yeah, I did get a little uneasy because I felt like that was kind of basic.
So, Holsum One, when you watch a game like you did with an eye toward an opponent, meaning you're just not watching a football game, but even when you're just watching a football game, I know that you're analyzing technique and scheme and so forth. But when you're watching thinking, okay, the Canes are playing this team and I don't know a whole lot about them, but they're playing Central Arkansas. So there's two difficult things in my mind in making that scouting report. Is it would be one thing if UAB would have been playing Pitt or Louisville or somebody with similar physical talent on the field as Miami. So you're having to judge UAB's ability versus a lesser opponent, number one. And number two, depending on Central Arkansas's style of play and their approach offensive and defensively, in terms of UAB facing an opponent that looks like Miami offensive and defensively from a scheme standpoint, that being easier to evaluate and translate what you may see last Saturday versus coming up on Thursday, if you follow me. One, from a talent standpoint, trying to make that adjustment in your mind, and also from a scheme standpoint to see, is this opponent really different than Miami, or are they running similar schemes offensive and defensively that we can see how UAB is reacting to that?
Yes, and think that's the tough part about watching games and not being able to get into like the coach film and stuff, because when you go into certain coach film, you can go back to like 2010 versus Indiana, or this offensive coordinator against this defensive coordinator who's now the DC at Louisville and he's the head coach at Kentucky. He called this play when they played against each other back in 2006 on this down, on this hash, and he liked it against this type of scheme. So now when you watch it, when I'm watching the fan, because I call it fan, but it's actually the TV version. Okay, you don't get the all 22, number one, unless it's like a really nice replay or a big hit. So you don't always get the all 22. You get the fan view from the sideline, okay? And when you're looking at it from the sideline, you can kind of see the main thing that a lot of people's eyes go to is when the ball is snapped, they go to the QB to where the ball goes. My eyes instantly go to the O-line, D-line, because I look at how are those tackles setting? How are those guards setting? Who's the double team? Where are we sliding? Where's the running back in this play? Is this a play to set up something later on? Or is this just a basic vanilla play, get a couple yards, you can set you up with second and manageable, or third and manageable, all those type of things, okay? So that's where my mind instantly goes. If I'm scouting the defensive line for UAB, looking at it from the offensive perspective to them, my eyes instantly go one by one by one. I spend like 3 hours watching film because I'll spend about 5 to 10 minutes watching the same play. Because one play I'm going to watch, okay, this two-eye technique defensive tackle is going up against this guard who's already been kind of beaten down. But I want to see what he does when he feels comfortable. Is he flying off of that ball and he just, instead of engaging and blowing him up, does he try to swim right over and make a play in the backfield, which is what one of their interior defensive tackles does at number 44. What's my brother's name? Give me 2 seconds here. His name is Anthony Moultrie, redshirt junior, 6'4", 285 pounds. He's slender. So he's basically a DN who they made and put some weight on him, moved him into defensive tackle. He's more of the finesse guy. He doesn't engage with offensive guards. He likes to swim. He likes to spin. He likes to double swipe and just get your hands off of him. So now he can play finesse game and make a play. And next to him is going to be somebody different. Number 10, and Tyree Turner, redshirt senior, 6'1", 308. He's the bigger, kind of more traditional defensive tackle who takes on the double teams. So when I'm looking and I'm scouting against the defensive line, I'm looking at who takes on double teams well, who splits them well. But you got to keep in the back of your mind, Mark, the offensive lineman at Miami are going to be a little bit different than the offensive linemen at Central Arkansas. So you have to just kind of test that back and forth as to, do I put a lot of weight into what I'm looking at against this caliber of opponent? Because that's why I don't always look at results or stats. I look at the techniques as far as what they're lining up technique and the techniques of the players. Because when you take on a double team, you're taking on a double team. It's not like, oh, I'm taking on a double team because it's Central Arkansas, so I'm going to play it this way. No, it's how your coach is teaching you to take on that double team. How your coach is, as a cornerback, how is he teaching you to play the ball? Are you playing eyes and hands, or you locate and contest the ball? You know, or as a safety, are we to a point where we only play too high because we don't really trust our corners? Or do we trust our corners? We got one high up and we got one down, more of a cover 3 scheme or a cover 0 scheme where we love to go man. You know, you look at UAB, they played a lot of off coverage. A lot. They never got up in the face and pressed against Central Arkansas. So if I'm Miami, it's like, why are we playing off? Do you not trust your players? Do you just think that they're that bad that you can play off and still be able to come and rally to the ball? So when I'm watching a game and I'm scouting, a lot of that stuff comes into play. I love to watch a lot of the in-conference games because it's, best of best. But that's actually a really good question as to what I'm looking at. But if I go deep into O-line or D-line, I'm looking at, who do they like to double team? Where do they put their strength? Because some teams are a little weird, Mark. The tight call isn't always where the strength of the offense is. So they could be tight left, but you got a 3-by-1, which means there's a tight to this side, but the 3 wide receivers is on that side. So it's really strong right, tight left. Some teams go wherever that tight is, that's our strength. So we're going to have our defense shift that way. So there's just little things you're able to notice as you're watching it. And when you know what to look for, it's kind of like a great director watching a movie. They can tell where the cut is, where the lighting is, why they went that way. Oh, it could have been much better if they did it from this angle. If they had this type of light, if they zoomed in a little bit more, or if they zoomed out and the sun was rising above, that type of stuff you're able to really look at. And sometimes, like I say, I get a lot of the overanalyzed Mark, but at the same time, that's what I'm going to be doing for the next 40 years. So why not, huh?
And I've got to think that the secondary in particular is difficult to analyze on the TV game because the quarterback drops back to pass. The camera goes with the ball. You're looking at the offensive line and defensive line struggle at the line. You're looking at the quarterback, but we don't know what kind of separation the wide receivers have downfield. We don't know if the quarterback made a bad decision because this dude was wide open over here and he threw it over here. So you get the limited view on television. Although in the last, I'd say 5 years, they're showing us more of that elevated view with the sky cam from behind the quarterback in the center downfield and give us that look more often than they used to.
Right.
So you need to give us
and that's
that
called
thought.
rear. That's rear view. Rear view is QB view or linebacker view. Rear and sideline. Those are your two terms, rear and sideline view.
And I also have to think that it's the most difficult evaluation for you to make from game 1 going into game 2 because you've only seen the one game against the one opponent and a lot of adjustments are going to be made versus if it's week 8 and this corner you've seen for 7 games continues to bite on the double move or this tackle continues to whiff on the inside swim move. It's probably not going to change at this point. They've been doing it for 8 weeks. It's probably not going to change. And you've really got a lock on the personnel and what they do well and what they don't do well.
Exactly. And then, like I said, scouting against them, I mean, UAB is going to self-scout too. And then what do they have to scout for Miami? Oh, you're going to go to the Instagram and look at a couple of the highlights? Because there are QCs that do that, just to let people know. Are you going to have people that listen to the interviews to hear what type of scheme they're going to run? Yes, there are coaches that do that too. But at the same time, what they're going to do is go look at Coach Rick Lashley at his other stops. They're going to go look at Rob Likens at his other stops and how his wide receivers released, how his wide receivers played the ball. They're going to look at, Miami last year at tight end. How did they use him? The offensive line coach Now, Coach Garrett Justice was at like a D3, so maybe a little harder to find film on him and how he scouts his players. So you kind of really look at the QB, the wide receivers, coaches, and running backs, things of that nature, and they're going to go off of last year's film. And one of the other things is when you have a lot of returning starters, there's a lot of film on said players. So you're able to go back and see how they do, really well or bad. And that's one of the things that was talked about with our senior linebackers last year versus Florida. Well, there was 3 whole years worth of film on both those inside linebackers, and that's why they got atrociously destroyed versus Florida. They played horrible. And one of the main things that, one of those coaches said was we had a lot of film on those guys, so we knew how to attack them. So we're going to see.
Holsum One, I know that you feel good, as I do as well, when people encourage you with the support, the inspiration to say, hey, love the content, love what you're doing, keep it up. It's a bright spot in my day. But especially, it's even more meaningful when somebody says, I'm going through some rough times. This is a bright spot. I got to deal with a lot of things in my life, but man, when I flip on your video, it kind of takes me away from that. I'm able to put a smile on my face. We got a comment here from LeBrent. Mark, Holsum One, during unprecedented times in our lives, we've seen a lot of depression and despair. Thank you for your constant love of sports to help us.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So it sounds like based on the feedback we got, our discussion with Cam Underwood the other day, that our progression of quarterbacks on the depth chart actually knocks Tate Martell down to a 4th spot with Tyler Van Dyke at number 3.
Right, and that's what I was going to get into, is that the official depth chart for this game was released yesterday, so I can go down it if you would like. Yeah,
so outline the depth chart and obviously stop at those places that you think are meaningful.
Oh, yeah, sure. So at QB, you had QB1, and it's something like that Cam has said months ago, Pierre King's QB1. The conversation is who's 2 or 3. And as of right now, it's N'Kosi Perry at number 2. And I'm happy to see that, man, because there was a lot of talk about him. People even saying he was going to leave and rumors and all that type of stuff. He just recently had his daughter. So to be able to kind of focus all of that in and be able to be a part of this battle to get that 2nd spot and to win it, because N'Kosi Perry has contributed to this team every single year, whether it was in 2018, 2019, and hopefully it'll be in a point where he gets to hop in a blowout and, put up some stats for us as the 2nd. 3rd is Tyler Van Dyke, who most people thought would be a redshirt candidate, who may still be a redshirt candidate moving forward, running the 3rd. But, he's deadly accurate, and the coaches like him. And, as long as my biggest fear would have been if he was 2nd, then I would have been like, oh, maybe it's a little favoritism in there. But either way, it was fair across the board. So you got Derek King at number 1, Kosi at number 2, and Tyler Van Dyke at number 3. Running backs, here's the good part, is Cam Harris is the starter. I talked about the 2 leaders, and Derek King and Cam Harris as being team leaders, not just offensive team leaders across the board. And to have him solidify that 1 spot, because after the first scrimmage, even I was amped and super happy with Jalen Knight and Donald Chaney Jr. and the way that they ran all over the 2nd and 3rd and scout team defense. So it's nice to see them as oars. So it's Jalen Knight and or Donald Chaney Jr. It's not, 2 and 3. So that means that they both graded very similar, if not the exact same, over the camp and what they're going to bring to the table. And behind them is Robert Burns, a guy that we have talked about for years now, kind of battling a lot of injuries throughout his career here at Miami, and we'll see what he brings to the table for the U. At wide receiver, the number 1, the ex-wide receiver, is going to be Mark Pope. That's personally happy for me to see, because everyone has their rumors of the Rivals 5-star, ESPN 4-star, and everywhere else 4-star. Everybody has the rumors about and their own opinions about Mark Pope, and I like to see he's put on weight. He's gained the weight. He's put in the work. He's put in the effort. He's learned that playbook. He's honed in on it, and he's our number one. Behind him is Jeremiah Payton. Behind Jeremiah Payton is Dazzlin Warsham, true freshman. At our wide receiver, number 2 is going to be D. Wiggins. Everybody knows, you go to my channel, look at the highlight tape, type in D. Wiggins. First video that pops up, highlight tape made by the Holsum. Deep ball, really good hands. Really worked on those because as a freshman, his hands were atrocious. And now he's bringing in the ball, doing it to a high level, and had a lot of production last year for us. Behind him, Michael Redden III. Your prototypical wide receiver right now, 6'3", 210 pounds off the rip. Yes, he's a freshman from IMG Academy, but you got to look at IMG Academy has been filtering out some big-time recruits left and right. So it's really good to see Michael Redding sign with Miami and be able to run with the twos, doing really well. Behind them is Keyshawn Smith. If you want to talk about somebody who the fan base is loving on, but Cam was Keyshawn Smith, man. He was saying this dude's going to be a big-time dynamic wide receiver for us, bringing size and speed from the West Coast. And he said that way before any of these highlights came out of him doing exactly that at Miami. So that's beautiful to see. He's running the third team right now, which is pretty good. Now the Z, our slot wide receiver, Mike Harley, the most productive wide receiver returning, most receptions and touchdowns as of right now. You also have Marshall Few and Xavier Restrepo, 3-star guy from South Florida, one of the most hardworking guys on the team. He's also changed his number from number 80 to number 7 to be able to give tribute to his fallen friend who was shot and killed, who was signing with Georgia Tech. They were coming out together, but he wasn't able to make it because he was murdered. So Xavier Restrepo asked the coaches if he was able to switch his number from 8 to 7 for tribute for his friend. So that's just amazing to see. At tight end, you have an or, Reverend Jordan and Will Mallory. We've talked about them forever, so we got to see it. Let's take the next step at tight end. Behind those two, Larry Hodges and Dominic Memorelli. Now, the position that everybody wants to have their opinions on, offensive line. John Campbell, a player who has played guard for us, played some tackle, had a pretty bad Florida game, has actually come in and fully taken over the left tackle spot completely. It's his. He never lost it from day one all the way to right now at left tackle. Zion Nelson is behind him. And noted, Zion Nelson went from 240 pounds a year ago, this time, to 312. So he's gradually putting on that really good weight. And that's beautiful. At left guard, Usman Traore, JUCO transfer. And behind him, Jalen Rivers, true freshman Jalen Rivers, getting on the 2 deep. That's really nice to see. At center, you got Corey Gaynor, who's, I think, is 2 years starting now. I was going to say 3, but 2 years starting now for Miami. Behind him, Jakai Clark, who started some games at center and guard for us last year. Right guard, DJ Scape, our best and highest graded offensive lineman returning back, moving inside to guard. He's backed up by Cleveland Reed. At right tackle, the transfer from Houston, Jared Williams, holding it down. All 6'7", 308 pounds of him, holding it down at right tackle. And he's backed up by true freshman Chris Washington. So it's, Mark, and I'll stop there. We'll talk a little bit and we'll go to the defense. But it's great to see these freshmen coming in and contributing. Like I said on my live last night, I'm not here to take shots at our own players, but it's nice to see these freshmen coming in, contributing, meaning that we're out recruiting some guys, and they're actually showing up and making the plays that we want them to make and pushing those starters. And instead of running third team or scout team, they're on the 2 deep, which means they're probably going to be able to contribute to the team this upcoming year, whether it's at wide receiver, O-line, or running back. So it's good to see that the recruiting at Miami is taking steps up.
Holsum, one before you move on to the defense, to clean a few things up. 904 Hurricane having some fun with me, mentioning that I'm hating on Miami, by rooting for Notre Dame to win the ACC. Okay, let's put this into context and let's understand something. This has nothing to do with Miami. Doesn't have anything to do with Wake Forest, Duke, anybody that plays in the ACC. It doesn't even have anything to do with Notre Dame. I could care less about Notre Dame. Don't care if they win another football game in their history. This has everything to do with me and the ACC and my evaluation of the ACC making a poor decision in the way they've treated Notre Dame and allowed Notre Dame to trample on them. That's what it has to do with. And I really don't care who wins the ACC. I just think it would be amusing. It would be ironic. I've stated that if Notre Dame would come in for 1 year, win the ACC, then say, we used you for a year. We're back to our independent status. See ya. Thank you. Where the ACC could have made a power play and said, you want to join our conference? Join our conference. Truly join our conference. Not for 1 year. We're going to save you for this year, but you got to join our conference. That's the only reason I think it would be amusing if Notre Dame won the ACC.
And
Julian Smith.
You talk about amusing, Mark. You know what's crazy? This week, and you could go check it out for yourself. They still have it up. Their official Notre Dame football Twitter literally put up a video of the ACC logo being printed on their field and quoted it saying, "Looks cute, might delete next year." Like, just think about that.
Now, if this is being negotiated right now, and there's still a possibility down the road if they can work things out, then maybe the ACC, if they are making a strategic move to say, okay, it's not guaranteed, we haven't convinced them, but they're open to it, we're talking, we're in negotiations, and they feel good about it, well, then you sometimes have to make those considerations. But I don't necessarily have any indication that that's happening. Julian Smith, just to set the record straight, it's not a 25-year anniversary of Doug Flutie and Boston College in the Hail Mary against Miami. It's technically going to be 26, November of 84, Thanksgiving weekend, one of the most famous plays in college football history. So just 25, 26, whatever. So it's the 26th year anniversary of that play. All right, Holsum one, let's check out the defense.
Okay, so we got our strong side defensive ends, Jalen Phillips. Okay, so strong side defensive end means that they are the left end going up against your right tackle. You think strong side defensive end, think of your Khalil Macks, bigger, stronger guys. Think of a weak side defensive end, you think of a Von Miller. Little shorter, little slender, more of a finesse guy instead of just strong hands blowing people up type of player. So Jalen Phillips, 6'6", 270. I'm done talking. I want to see it. This dude, man, I don't want to be a part of the hype train, but it's hard not to. We just got to see it come out and be productive. Behind him, you have Jahvari Harvey, one of my favorite players from Surge 19 a year ago. And now as a redshirt freshman, he's contributing. You know, he's up to 250. He looks like a player. They got him playing some, even some special teams. If you got defensive ends running down on kickoff, they better be some big-time athletes. Then that's what Jahvari Harvey's bringing to the table. Behind him is Patrick Joyner. Talked about that earlier. Linebacker moving a defensive end who's really just always been a defensive end. Had to play linebacker in a pinch. Behind him, Quentin Williams, a dude I was able to meet when I was down in Miami. A really humble young man. Know his father, so he's a really good kid, man. And it's crazy to think that when you start recruiting different, some of the young men that walk in, I don't know the last time we had a 6'4", 260-pound true freshman just walking through the door. So now as a strength and conditioning and nutrition staff, you just got to reshape that body because goodness gracious, that dude was dense. Mark, I clapped him up and brought him in for the hug, and he was like, "Doom!" I was like, "Oh, good God. Yeah, you're a freshman?" Yeah, so, hey, we're going to see where we can take it from there. Weak side defensive end. So now they're going up against the left tackle. On the other side, Quincy Roche, transfer from Temple. 26 career sacks at Temple. If we could get half of that, I would be ultra happy for him bringing that to the U. Behind him, you have Cam Williams, red shirt freshman, 6'5", 250 pounds. So he's putting on the weight, contributing pretty well, running the twos. Behind him, Chance Williams, 4-star recruit, edge rusher, a name that was really infamous about a year ago. Cam talked about it. I talked about it. He wanted to go SEC. And then he had one conversation with Coach Manny Diaz. He's like, you know what? I'm with Miami, and I'm going with my god brother Jalen Rivers. So that's great to see that he's contributing. He was running with the twos. I don't know what happened. Cam Williams has been on a big time roll the last couple of weeks in practice. So maybe that's what the switch was, but I think it'll be a continuous battle throughout the season there as the backups. Move over to defensive tackle. 3 technique. So outside shade of the guard, guys that shoot the gaps. Instead of taking on double teams, think of your Warren Saps, think of your Aaron Donalds. So you got Nicosi Perry. Nasty Nesta Silvera. Dude, we got to see it, man. We got to see it. 50-year-old black man. Sounds like someone has had a wholesome dose of cognac. All right, so you got Jordan Miller behind Nesta Silvera. I'm still wondering why Jordan Miller is playing 3 technique, but he's 6'4", 318, so maybe he's just that athletic. So we'll see. That's what he's running behind Nesta Silvera. You also have Jason Blissett and Elijah Roberts, who were recruited defensive ends to come in and play the 3 technique defensive tackle. You have 1 technique defensive tackle, which means they're the bigger guys. So you're talking about your Haluli Natas, you're talking about your Ndamukong Suhs, your Vince Wilforks. They're taking on doubles. You need your bigger guys here. And you're going to have John Ford, who's 6'5", 318. Jared Harrison Hunt, 6'4", 280. Still a little confused on why he's a 1 technique, but here nor there. And Jalir Holly, who's 6'2", about 280, 290. Your weak side linebacker, you have Zach McLeod as our starter. Behind him, Wayman Steed, Avery Huff, and Tyreek Austin Cave. The middle linebacker, B.J. Jennings. Behind him, Sam Brooks, a name we've talked about a lot on here, and Corey Flagg Jr., true freshman. Our striker position is a battle between Gilbert Frierson and Keontra Smith. So there's an or there. They don't know which one's the starter yet, so it's going to be kind of a game time decision of who's going to run out first. But Mark, as you know, and I've tried to educate my subscribers on college ball, you have your starters, but it's about the snap count, because you may have a starter and a backup, and let's say there's 80 defensive plays, Mark, and they both play 40 snaps. Is it, the other guy's the starter, but we were on the field the exact amount of time, exact amount of snaps. So keep that in mind. At cornerback, you have Al Blaze Jr., who's our penciled in number 1. He's a guy that kind of separated between him and DJ Ivy. Behind him, you have Corey Couch and Isaiah Dunson, athletic cornerback from Georgia. The number 2 corner spot and depth chart is going to be DJ Ivy, followed up by Christian Williams, 4-star recruit from Louisiana. Behind them is Marcus Clark from Orange Park, Orlando, Florida. 3-star recruit guy who's a special teams ace guy that I really loved from the class of 2020. Our nickel is between Corey Couch and Marcus Clark. At free safety, you have a battle where it's Bubba Bowden and Gervin Hall. So it's Bubba Bowden or Gervin Hall. Behind them is Keyshawn Washington and Jalen Harrell. At strong safety, Bubba Bowden is also an or with Amari Carter. So Bubba Bowden's doing big things, man. He could be a starter at free or strong, wherever we want to go with it. But all 3 of those men are going to play. Gervin Hall, Bubba Bowden, and Amari Carter will play a lot of ball as our 3 returning safeties. And behind them, at strong safety, is Brian Balaam. Kicker, Jose Borregales, FIU all-time kicker, all-time leader in points scored. Our punter is Lou Headley. Probably should have been the offensive MVP last year. That was the most punts I've ever seen. Goodness gracious, Mark. At kick return, listen to this, Mark. Pope. Mark Pope is our kick return and punt returner. That is crazy. That is crazy. Mark Pope is just doing things. He's the number 1 wide receiver at X, and he's our punt and kick returner. So he's going to bring something to the table, man. I can't wait for him to show everybody and show me, because I don't know what he's been doing, but he must be doing something right. Behind Mark Pope at kick returner or next to him is going to be Cam Harris, followed up by Mike Harley. And you're also going to have Jalen Knighton And that punt return is a little weird because you got Mark Pope, but behind him, it's Dervin Hall, starting free safety. So we'll see with that. And then Xavier Restrepo, a freshman slot receiver, is the third string punt returner. So that's our depth chart, man. And that's the depth chart for UAB. And the coaches have made it known this isn't a depth chart for the 2020 season. It's a depth chart for UAB. So for players who are upset or have questions, you got to keep competing if you want, especially with a lot of ors in there or ands in there. You got to be able to contribute and fight and get some more PT.
So, folks, keep in mind that I've been releasing my ACC game-by-game predictions. So I have made my way through almost the entire ACC, released a Florida State video this morning. I've got Miami, Notre Dame. No, I released Notre Dame. I've got Miami and Clemson. The last two game-by-game predictions. I noticed that in the Football Power Index, they're giving Miami a 66% chance of defeating UAB. I thought that was a little low. I went with 83%. Game at home against UAB is about a 14 to 15 point favorite the last I saw. Appreciate the Holsum one joining us to break down the UAB lineup and personnel. I've got to jump off here. I got a Big Ten podcast I got to make to talk some Michigan football. All right, Holsum one, we appreciate it. Yep.
No problem.
We got to keep it going here. I'm going to remind everyone that we talk Florida State at 6 o'clock tonight and then ACC preview at 7:30. Holsum one, we appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game Thursday night. And again, everybody else, lock it in at HOLSUM and the number 1 if you haven't already for Miami football talk throughout the week. All right, man, we appreciate it as always. And hopefully we can catch up next week, talk the UAB game and week 2.
And Louisville preview. I'm hopping on.